They called me 3 days after my father died. Not to ask how I was holding up, not to ask if I was sleeping, not even to ask if I had arrived safely back in town. They called to tell me when to show up. My sister's voice was calm, almost efficient. "We'll have dinner at 7, she said. "Mom wants everyone here." Everyone. The word felt strange, considering how invisible I already felt. I hadn't lived in that house for years, but the moment I pulled into the driveway, my chest tightened. The old oak tree was still there. The mailbox still leaned slightly to the left. Everything looked familiar, except the feeling. I grabbed my bag and stood there for a moment, staring at the front door, wondering why it suddenly felt like I was trespassing. When I stepped inside, the smell hit me first. Old furniture, dust, and something heavier, something unspoken. My sister was already there. She was sitting on the couch, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like nothing in the world had changed. No tears, no red eyes. She barely looked up when I entered. "Oh," she said. "You're here." That was it. No hug, no "I'm sorry." No mention of Dad. I stood there awkwardly for a second before placing my bag near the stairs. My mother was in the kitchen. I could hear her moving things around, opening and closing cabinets, pretending to be busy. My father's favorite mug sat on the counter, clean, unused. She glanced at me briefly. "You look tired," she said. Not "I'm glad you came." Not "I know this is hard." Just tired. My father's chair at the table was empty. No one sat there. Not because it hurt, but because it felt reserved. Like someone was already planning to take it. At dinner, we talked about everything except him. The weather, the drive, my sister's work. Every time I tried to bring my father up, the conversation shifted. "We'll talk about that later," my mother said at one point. Later never came. I noticed things that night. Small things. How my sister corrected me when I spoke about Dad's wishes. How my mother avoided eye contact when finances came up. How certain rooms suddenly felt off limits. After dinner, I went to my old room. It had been changed. Not cleaned, changed. Some of my things were gone. The bookshelf was emptier. My father's old watch, the one he said would be mine someday, was missing. I stood there staring at the empty space on the dresser. That's when the first knot formed in my stomach. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet but not peaceful. Around midnight, I walked down the hallway to get water. That's when I heard voices. My sister's voice, my mother's voice, low, controlled. I stopped. "He doesn't need to know yet," my sister whispered. My name wasn't said, yours, but I knew. My mother replied softly, "He won't fight. He never does." Something cold ran through me. They weren't grieving. They were strategizing. I stepped back quietly, my heart pounding, suddenly aware that this wasn't just about loss. This was about positioning. The next morning, things got stranger. I found paperwork on the dining table. Documents stacked neatly, already sorted. When I asked what they were, my sister quickly gathered them. "Just boring legal stuff," she said. "You don't need to worry. You don't need to worry." That sentence stayed with me all day. Over the next few days, I noticed how often I was excluded. Meetings that happened without me. Phone calls taken in another room. Decisions made before I was even asked. Once, I overheard my sister on the phone. "Yes," she said, pacing. "Everything's under control. He's still here, but yeah." She lowered her voice when she saw me. That night, my mother finally mentioned the will. "We'll have the reading next week," she said casually, as if she were talking about groceries. I nodded. Inside, something told me this wouldn't go the way I expected. I remembered things then, moments I had ignored. How my father once told me, people show their true selves when money is involved. How he insisted on meeting with his lawyer alone. How he warned me quietly, "Promise me you won't disappear no matter what they say." I didn't understand then. I was about to. The day before the reading, my sister cornered me in the kitchen. She smiled. Not kindly. "You're okay, right?" she asked. "With however things turn out?" I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "Dad wanted things to be simple. Simple." That night, I barely slept. Because deep down, I knew something terrible was coming. And worse, I knew they believed I wouldn't stop it. I walked into that lawyer's office believing I would lose my father all over again. I didn't know I was about to lose my family too. I didn't always understand my place in that family. As a kid, I thought love was something you earned by behaving, by helping, by not causing problems. So I became good at disappearing. My sister didn't. She was loud, demanding, certain. If she cried, everyone stopped. If I stayed quiet, no one noticed. And over the years, that difference became a pattern. When my sister needed money, it was just temporary. When I needed help, it was not a good time. When she made mistakes, they were forgiven. When I did, they were remembered. Growing up, I told myself I was imagining things. That families weren't perfect. That fairness wasn't guaranteed. But after my father died, all those old memories came back. And suddenly they made sense. The morning after that strange dinner, I woke up early. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked into the kitchen and found my mother already there, staring at the window, coffee untouched. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "You should go back home after the reading," she said. "There's no reason for you to stay longer than necessary." I paused. "Why?" I asked. She sighed, not angrily, not sadly, just inconvenienced. "It will be easier for everyone. Everyone, not me." Later that day, my sister suggested we go through some of my father's belongings. "Just to organize," she said. But the moment we entered his office, I knew something was wrong. Drawers were already empty, folders rearranged. She moved confidently, like she had been there many times before. "Dad trusted me with these things," she said casually. I picked up a photo from his desk, one of us from years ago. He had his arm around me. I remembered that day. He had told me quietly, "You see things others don't. That's a strength." My sister noticed the photo and took it from my hands. "You can keep that," she said. "I'll take the important stuff." Important. That word echoed in my head. That afternoon, my aunt stopped by. She hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered. Then she glanced around and lowered her voice. "Be careful." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then smiled politely when my sister walked into the room. Later, she pulled me aside. "Your father was worried," she said quietly. "He told me things might get complicated." "What things?" I asked. She shook her head. "He wanted you protected." That night, I confronted my mother. "Did Dad ever talk about the will?" I asked. She stiffened. "He didn't want conflict," and she replied. "Did he talk to a lawyer alone?" I pressed. She snapped. "Why are you asking so many questions?" There it was, fear. Not grief, not sadness, fear. Over the next few days, the pattern intensified. My sister controlled information. She decided what I could know and when. When the lawyer's office called, she answered. When documents arrived, she opened them. I was always informed last, if at all. Once I overheard her arguing on the phone. "No, he doesn't suspect anything," she said sharply. "Yes, I'll handle it." I froze. That night, I went to my father's old closet. Something told me to look. Behind a stack of coats, I found an envelope. My name. Just my name. Inside was a note, handwritten. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And if things feel wrong, trust that feeling." My hands were shaking. There was no will inside. No instructions. Just one sentence at the bottom. "The truth will come out, but only if you stay." I hid the note back where I found it. I didn't tell anyone. The day before the reading, my sister cornered me again. She stood too close. "You know," she said softly, "Dad always said you were sensitive." I said nothing. She smiled. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." That night, my father appeared in my dreams. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, the way he used to when he wanted me to understand something without words. I woke up with a certainty I couldn't explain. They believed I would fold. They believed I would accept whatever they handed me. They were wrong. The morning of the will reading, my mother knocked on my door. "You ready?" she asked. Her voice was polite, controlled, like this was a meeting, not a reckoning. As we drove to the lawyer's office, no one spoke. My sister checked her phone. My mother stared straight ahead, and I watched the city pass by thinking about that note. Stay. When we walked into that office, I felt it. This wasn't just about money. This was about erasing me. And they were confident they could. They walked into that room believing they had already won. I walked in knowing I was about to be tested. The lawyer's office felt colder than I remembered. Not because of the air conditioning, but because of the people inside. Dark wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with law books that looked untouched. Framed certificates hung perfectly aligned, as if precision itself lived there. The kind of room where decisions were final, and rarely kind. We sat around a long table. My sister chose the chair closest to the lawyer. Of course she did. My parents sat beside her, forming a tight line, shoulders almost touching. A silent agreement, a united front. I sat alone. There was an empty chair next to me. No one took it. The lawyer entered, nodded politely, and sat down. He stacked the documents carefully, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. "Thank you all for coming," he said. No one replied. He began. "This is the last will and testament of..." He said my father's name. Hearing it out loud made my throat tighten. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then the reading started. Properties, accounts, investments. Each item was read slowly, clearly, professionally. And with each one, I waited. I told myself my name would come up soon. It had to. Minutes passed. Nothing. My sister sat back comfortably, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap. She wasn't listening. She already knew. My mother nodded occasionally, like she was confirming something she'd memorized. My father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The lawyer turned a page. Still nothing. That's when my chest started to burn. Not panic, something worse. Recognition. They weren't forgetting me. They were skipping me. I shifted in my seat. The lawyer continued. "The primary residence will be transferred to..." My sister. She smiled. Not proudly. Relieved. Like someone who'd been holding their breath and finally exhaled. The land. Her the savings, her again. I looked at my parents. They didn't look back. The lawyer reached the end of another page. My sister leaned slightly toward my mother and whispered something. My mother nodded. They weren't even pretending anymore. Finally, I couldn't take it. "Excuse me," I said quietly. The lawyer looked up. "Yes?" "My name hasn't been mentioned." The room froze. My sister let out a short laugh. Not amused, dismissive. She turned to me, finally giving me her full attention, and said it, clearly, confidently, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You deserve nothing." The words hung in the air. No one objected. No one corrected her. My mother looked down at her hands. My father swallowed hard and stayed silent. That silence crushed me, more than the words. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Please," he said, "let me continue." I nodded, barely breathing. The reading went on, as if I hadn't spoken, as if I hadn't mattered, as if years of loyalty, sacrifice, and presence could be erased with one sentence. I remembered my father asking me to stay late at the hospital. I remembered paying for repairs when no one else would. I remembered birthdays missed, trips cancelled, life paused. And now, this. My sister glanced at me again, this time with something close to pity. She leaned in and whispered, "You should have known your place." Something inside me broke, not loudly, quietly. The lawyer reached what felt like the end. He stacked the papers neatly. "This concludes..." He stopped, mid-sentence. Not because he lost his place, because he chose to. He stared at the page longer than necessary. Then he looked up. The air shifted. "Before I conclude," he said slowly, "I need to address something." My sister sighed, annoyed. "Is this really necessary?" she asked. The lawyer ignored her. "There is," he said, "an additional clause." My mother stiffened. My father's eyes widened slightly. My sister straightened in her chair. The lawyer continued. "This clause was added 6 months prior to your father's passing." My sister laughed nervously. "That's impossible," she said. "We've seen the will." The lawyer finally looked directly at her. "You've seen a version," he replied. Silence. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. "This clause," he continued, "was requested by your father to be read only under specific circumstances." My mother whispered, "What circumstances?" The lawyer glanced at me. "An attempt," he said calmly, "to erase or deny the existence of a rightful heir." No one spoke. My sister's face drained of color. That's ridiculous, she snapped. He's just upset. The lawyer raised his hand gently. I'm not finished. He began to read, slowly, deliberately. If any beneficiary attempts to exclude, humiliate, or deny another heir their rightful share. My sister stood up. This is absurd, she said, as this is harassment. The lawyer didn't stop. Ale primary assets will immediately be transferred to the excluded party. The room went completely still. My mother gasped. My father whispered my sister's name. My sister shook her head. No, that's not legal. The lawyer looked up. It is, he said. And it has already been executed. He turned the document toward me. I didn't reach for it. I couldn't. The house, the land, the accounts, my name, printed clearly. My sister's mouth opened. Nothing came out. My mother stood up slowly, hands trembling. This must be a mistake, she said. The lawyer shook his head. Your husband was very clear, he replied. He anticipated this. I finally stood. My legs felt weak, but my voice didn't. You laughed, I said quietly. You told me I deserved nothing. I looked at my sister, then my parents. I deserved honesty. No one answered. The lawyer closed the folder. The reading is concluded. And just like that, the room that erased me became the room that exposed them. They tried to take everything from me. They didn't realize my father had planned for this moment. In the first second, nobody said anything. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. My sister stood still, her hands slightly open, like someone who had just dropped something, and didn't understand why it wasn't there anymore. My mother was the first to react. This is absurd, she said, her voice trembling. This can't be valid. The lawyer remained calm. It's already been registered, he replied. There's nothing to reverse here. My father finally stood up. He looked smaller, hunched over, tired. Son, he began. It was the first time he had addressed me that day. But before he could continue, my sister exploded. You orchestrated this, she shouted, pointing at me. You manipulated him. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The lawyer intervened. Your father made this decision alone, he said. And she documented everything. My sister started pacing the room. This doesn't make sense, as she repeated. This doesn't make sense. My mother approached me. Her tone changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It was pleading. We can talk, she said softly. Resolve this as a family. Family. The word sounded strange. My sister heard and turned quickly. No, she said. Not after everything. She stared at me. You know this will destroy us, she whispered. Is that what you want? There it was, the blackmail. I took a deep breath. You had already decided to destroy me, I replied calmly. My father closed his eyes. It wasn't like that, he murmured. Then why didn't anyone say anything when she said I didn't deserve anything? I asked. Silence. We left the office in silence. But the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. That same night, my phone started ringing. Messages, calls, my mother, my father, my sister. First requests, then accusations. You're exaggerating. Your father didn't want this. You've always been too sensitive. My sister was direct. If you don't share this with me, I'll destroy you. I didn't answer. The next day, she showed up at the house, unannounced. She walked in as if it was still hers. We need to talk, she said, throwing her bag on the sofa. You can't just take everything. I stared at her. That's exactly what you tried to do. She laughed nervously. This is different. Of course it was. When it was her, it was right. When it was me, it was wrong. My parents arrived soon after. My mother was crying. My father looked broken. Your father didn't sleep, my mother said. You're killing him. Another weapon. Guilt. I took a deep breath. You made decisions without me, I said. Now you have to deal with them. My sister approached. She lowered her voice. You were always the weak one, she said. You just got lucky this time. That's when I realized. She wasn't sorry. She was furious that she had lost. In the following days, the real attacks came. She tried to contest the will, tried to spread stories, tried to paint me as ungrateful. But every attempt failed because my father had foreseen everything. Documents, signatures, witnesses. One afternoon, my mother appeared alone, without makeup, without strength. He knew, she said, sitting up slowly. He knew this was going to happen. Then why did you let it happen? I asked. She cried, because it was easier to pretend I didn't see. There was the truth. It wasn't love, it was convenience. That night I found another letter from my father, hidden inside a book. They will try to break you emotionally. Don't let them. I understood everything. This wasn't just an inheritance. It was a test. They didn't want justice. They wanted control. And they hadn't given up yet. After the lawyer's office, nothing went back to normal. And not because I had moved house, but because the power had changed hands. The silence that once crushed me now suffocated them. In the first few days, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Long messages, tearful audio messages, missed calls in the middle of the night. My mother started with the gentlest version. You've always been the most sensitive. There's no need to be so radical. Family is family. My father came next, with a weak voice, tired. Your father never wanted a fight, he said on the phone. This is going too far. I listened in silence because it was always like this. When it hurt me, it was an exaggeration. When it hurt them, it was a tragedy. My sister took longer. When she spoke, there was no delicacy left. She showed up unexpectedly on a rainy afternoon. She didn't knock. She walked in, as if she still had that right. We need to resolve this now, she said, pacing the room as if assessing what she could still lose. Resolve what? I asked. She took a deep breath. You know, she replied, this can't stay like this. She sat down across from me. For the first time, it seemed smaller. Share it with me, she said. Half. Nobody needs to know. There it was, the real offer. Not regret, not justice, negotiation. You tried to erase me, I replied. Now you want to share? She laughed nervously. You always were after it was all over. Came the silence. Not the heavy silence of before, but a different silence, a clean silence. For years I confused noise with love. I confused presence with care. I confused tolerance with belonging. And when it all finally stopped, that's when I understood. My sister disappeared first, not officially, not with a goodbye. She simply stopped trying, stopped calling, stopped threatening, stopped pretending. Some people can't stand losing control, not because they lost something, but because they lost the one who obeyed them. My parents took longer. At first they still tried. Polite invitations, neutral messages, attempts at normalcy. Let's have dinner like before. We can pretend none of this happened. But I couldn't pretend anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I remembered that phrase. You deserve nothing. And I understood that certain words don't fade, they reveal. One afternoon, my father asked me to talk, alone. We sat in the backyard, the same backyard where he taught me to ride a bike, where I fell, where he told me to try again. He seemed tired, older than ever. I failed you, he said. I waited. I chose the easy way out, he continued. And that hurt you. I took a deep breath. You chose silence, I replied. And silence is also a choice. He nodded. He didn't try to justify himself. And for the first time, he didn't ask for anything. My mother never managed to go that far. She was still trying to balance things. Minimize. Rewrite. She didn't mean that. You know what she's like. But I already knew what everyone was like. And that changed everything. Over time, the house stopped feeling like a battlefield and started feeling like closure. I started going through my father's papers, not for money, but for answers. I discovered things he never said aloud. Fears, regrets, silent attempts to make up for mistakes he didn't have the courage to face. He protected me in the only way he could, on paper. And I forgave that, not because it was enough, but because it was real. The inheritance in the end was never the main point. The point was the moment everyone revealed who they were, and I finally stopped trying to be accepted by people who needed me to be small. The last time I saw my sister was by chance, in a public place. She saw me first. She hesitated. Then she looked away. And there I understood something important. She didn't lose money. She lost the mirror that confirmed her own version of herself. And that is unbearable for someone who lives under constant control. Today, when I think about that day in the lawyer's office, I don't feel anger. I feel clarity, because that's where it all ended and began. I didn't leave that room richer. I left free. Free from guilt. Free from expectation. Free from the idea that love needs to hurt to be real. If you're listening to this story and recognize yourself in some part of it, let me tell you something that took me years to understand. Being loyal doesn't mean accepting everything. Silence isn't a virtue when it silences you. And family isn't who keeps you small. It's who endures watching you grow. They said I didn't deserve anything. And they were right. About one thing. I didn't deserve that. And that's exactly why I left whole. Some people don't lose you because you changed. They lose you because you finally stopped accepting less than you deserved.